Hi, this is K.N.Fitzwater and you're watching my channel. And today we're going to talk about fallen heroes. More specifically, how do these fallen heroes obtain the truth? This is the same vein as the previous video where we talked about finding the goddess, which is Joseph Campbell's midpoint in his story arc, where the hero obtains a nugget of information that's going to transform him from a wanderer to a warrior. And I'm going to talk about how this is done to a hero that falters, a hero that becomes a horrible being. Why am I going to talk about this? Why should we write about this type of thing? You know, isn't it wrong? Not quite. We storytellers like to play with an unreliable narrator. That's probably the best term. A narrator that we think that we can't really trust. And it's so delicious to write this type of character because you don't know where things are going to head. You really don't know what they're going to concoct. It's just going to lead down to a lot of terrible and horrible things. Maybe things would turn out fine. You don't know. We also like playing the idea that they perceive the world quite differently from us. Most of us have very high morals when we write these stories. We kind of have a very firm definition of what is right, what is wrong, etc. Whether we follow those guidelines or not is up to us, but we understood what those guidelines are. We're able to paint the picture. So playing with a character that doesn't have these guidelines, doesn't have these boundaries, doesn't see it, is very scary and interesting to write. But why do audience members like watching them? I believe it's no different than Frodo looking at Smeagol and realizing that he too might become Gollum because of this ring. Audience members tend to like having a warning placed upon them so that way they could try to continue on the right path. Sometimes they like watching bad guys being bad because, you know, sometimes life sucks and you just want to, you know, deck life in the face. This helps them escape, but it's also a warning why they have to continue on life as it should be. Otherwise things go very horribly wrong for them. Another reason why I suspect that we like watching these things is because it is a villain's origin story, in a way. We like to see someone being transformed into something greater than the masses. Sometimes great doesn't mean good. Just like Ollivander said to Harry Potter, he did terrible things, but it was great. That is what I meant by that. We like seeing someone climbing above everyone, whether it is climbing to be a ultimate good guy or the ultimate bad guy. So this is one of the stories that we're going to play with. Now I'm assuming that you already know story act structure, and I'm going to assume that you know the basic hero's journey. I'm not going to try to reiterate all of that. I talked about several videos that are pretty related to this. I talked about the story structure, which is about how to pace your video and how I go about it in the circle diagram. And I really went into it in my last video, which is about how a normal typical hero obtains the truth and becomes the typical hero that we see. The whole Captain America complex. Here we're talking about how a hero takes the truth and becomes this villain. So we're exploring this a little further. And we're exploring it with a character that is dynamic. This type of truth transformation bit will not work with a flat character. simply because the Flack character is just a stick in the mud. Their morals stay the same. They're not really changed. This is the Katniss from the Hunger Games series. This is your normal survivalist character. A character that is not going to be transformed by the circumstances, but the whole world is transformed either by them or by exterior forces, and they were simply trying to survive. Here we have a hero transformed. So I am going to use a lot of references to George Lucas's Anakin, simply because he's the only one that breaks it down to right along with the Joseph Campbell story arc. He's a student of Joseph Campbell in a way. It's very clear how he does it in the movies. You can stop at certain sections of the story and you go, oh, this is how he did it this way. He's very easy to analyze. It's very clear, very simple. This one's a little bit convoluted simply because we have a nemesis mixed in who is actually a good guy. Another one I'm also going to pull in for references is Othello, Shakespeare's Othello. He does a 5-act structure. He's famous for it. It's very similar to how people do the 3-act structure, except the middle act is just huge. Where he does it very similar, where the first act is pretty much same old, except, things are just not right. He has a 2nd act structure, which is them being in this new situation, or they're going to a new situation and they're just adapting to it. The middle part is the crux of everything, and he takes his time playing that out, that whole moment. Then the 4th act is everything falling into place because they're acting on that information. The 5th is when everyone starts dying or things get absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to pull those references in hopes that I could help explain how someone could perceive something that is true even though we know it's false. This is great for those who are storytellers, and if you are a normal reader or an audience member, this is just pulling back the curtain a little bit. This is kind of how we break things down. In the 1st act, the very first section of the story, you have your Samuel Wolf. Here we have the inciting incident. Inciting incident being that things are not right in the world. This is in contrast to the call to the adventure, the call to the quest. Here we have the echoes of the dark side. We have a call to being evil, the whisperings and the seed planting of destruction. Something occurs that is just not right, and it upsets them and makes them start thinking about this thing that's just not right. In the case of Anakin, he does kill Count Dooku. This is not the first time he killed something that is against the Jedi Code. This is an echo of what he has done, but he's still not happy with it because he's supposed to be the right guy. This is the audience to know that the character is deep down inside is bad. In a case of Othello, we've learned that Othello had a quiet and secret marriage, which is a faux pas back then. You're not supposed to have secret marriages. You're not supposed to have ill-beings, simply because marriages are considered property contracts in a way. You want things all out in the open. You don't want to be slipshod. You want to do right. For him to have things in secret, people think there's something wrong. Was she pregnant, etc. Because Othello is a Moor, African descent man, rose to power, he felt that he had to do the secret marriage because people are going to object with a blatant normal marriage. Of course, Iago, his servant, who's undermining him, tries to make a big huge fuss about it, but of course he gets shut down because the Duke just resolved everything. But we get a glimpse of the dark side with this character. We get to see that things are not right. Things are at a tilt. So this is a great way to express it. Is through the inciting incident, through this information that, things are just not right. Going back to Anakin, George Lucas put in that Padme is going to die from childbirth. This is part of Palpatine's manipulations through visions, and it's also kind of the his Force sensibilities in perceiving the immediate future. This is the extra layer that you can do for your villain. In this case, he has a romantic subplot. Anakin's motivation throughout his whole arc is to protect his loved ones from harm. And he felt that being a Jedi is not good enough to do what he needs to do to protect his loved one. In the case of Shakespeare's Othello, we don't have the type of screen time that was given to Anakin. We have a very short play by our standards. So we don't get to see this type of layer. We don't get to see the mentality of Othello. We only see it through his servant, Iago. And we get to see everything through his perspective. So there was two ways you can showcase in your story. You can do it through the villain's perspective. You can do it the hero's perspective. When we break into the second act, it's not about this concern. They are breaking into the foreign territory because of an exterior force. But this is where the villain who is seducing this hero to the dark side shows up. And he shows up as a friend. Because the hero is lost and wandering around and not finding a solution to his problem, the villain shows up as a friend to help resolve issues. In the case of Anakin, this is Palpatine extending a hand saying, hey, I know how to take care of this problem with Padme, but it's not going to be the Jedi way. For the case of Othello, Iago really starts ramping up the deception that his wife is cheating on him and is trying to play up that he's only looking out for him. Instead of seeing in the dramatic structure, instead of seeing the villain or start showcasing their hand to do harm, either to their enemies or to this hero, they come in as a guide to help lead them on. They can be shown earlier in the movie or the book and be involved with this hero throughout this whole time. It depends on how you want this character, how this hero to be familiar with this seductive villain. But for the most part, this person has gained a large amount of trust because of this familiarity. And they're able to start weaving in lies and falsehoods to try to lead them down to their level or below it. The hero, in the very middle of the story, learns a piece of information that makes them go off. This is where the scales are tipped. And this is probably where a lot of people have issues with George Lucas's story. But I will quickly defend it, because it is, you can do these things in your own flavor, in your own way. Whether the people will like it or not, that depends on how well you pull it off. But in Othello's case, this is when he has physical proof, or physical evidence that his wife is cheating on him. Now we, the audience, knew, as we follow Iago, that this is not true. That handkerchief has been planted, and Othello is deceived. This is a huge lie. But because Iago, the seductive villain, was able to plant it and was able to make it so real, the main character, well, the hero that's supposed to fall, just bites into the apple and accepts it. In Anakin's case, he tells the truth to Mace Windu. Mace Windu learns the truth, then he goes off to take care of it while Anakin sits. Then Anakin takes action and saves Palpatine. That's the middle section, and I'm going to go into here where there are different flavors. You can do the whole goddess bit where you have a big huge truth, a little nugget of information that makes them go and do things. Or they're going to come to a crossroads and choose. George Lucas has it where the character comes to a crossroads, whether he is going to do the right thing or be evil. This is sort of played out in Othello, where Othello, throughout the whole story, doesn't believe his wife is cheating on him, is not accepting this, he doesn't believe it. He has doubts what Iago was saying. And because he was given the handkerchief, he no longer doubts and was suspicious. Here, you can take it in a very raw aspect where Anakin, was trying to do things that are good, trying to do the right thing, and then from here on out he's doing all the wrong things, all the bad things. So you can do it that way. But in the very end, both of them have it where they both bite the bait that the villain has been dangling in front of the hero all this time. They've been manipulating them, they've been showcasing them, they've been nudging them, but this is when they finally take it and run with it. Anakin finally accepts that Palpatine is going to save Padme. Even though he wasn't told that in the very middle of the story, this is when he finally acts on it. I know a lot of people will not agree with it because it's the prequels, but it is not a entirely bad story structure. It's just a different way of doing things. Your character now is considering being a villain. From here on out, you play out the transformation. Here we see the transformation of Anakin becoming Darth Vader. Pieces of him dies as he continues on. This is the same of Othello. In Othello's case, pieces of the relationship dies. They start falling apart, it's starting to disintegrate. This is the same thing with Anakin, where him being the Jedi Knight is starting to disintegrate as the evil is starting to showcase its face. You didn't really get to see the moment Othello incorporating the bad side until he really slaps his wife in front of Evil One. You don't see that until that moment, because this rage, this anger has been building up until that huge reaction. With Anakin, we don't really see it on that moment, but a little later when he really kills the younglings. He is doing everything in his power to fulfill his master's wishes in hopes that his master is going to throw him the bone, which is to save Padme. In the climax, it's up to you how you want to do it. But as far as I know of, the most personal that is to the hero and most devastating to the audience is going to be near the end. For Anakin's case, he has been fighting against the pedestal star, which is Obi-Wan. He wants to be in Obi-Wan's position. He wants to be this glorified Jedi Knight. He wants to be a master. He wants to be loved. He wants to have that power. And because he was not given that type of status, he kind of is a little jealous of his brother. He hated the younglings because he was once young and weak. So he killed his weakness. He had killed all of his peers, people who had doubted him, like Mace Windu. So because George Lucas set up, or tries to set up, Obi-Wan as Anakin's nemesis, you see them dueling, for the most part, throughout the whole climax. And he's not really transformed until near the end of the story. In Othello's story, in the climax, Iago is killing off his loose ends. He did follow through all of his subplots. Iago was taking care of all the stuff leading up to this great moment. And at the very end, it's Othello who killed his wife. This is kind of no different than Anakin killing Padme. But here it's done later in the story because this is personal. And it's horrifying to the audience. And we do see him transformed afterwards. He becomes this murderer. Of course, the cat is out of the bag, and when Othello realized he killed an innocent, someone who was his faithful wife this whole time, and it's his underling that's been undermining him, he kills himself. He was filled with sorrow and pity. No different than Anakin feeling with sorrow and pity that he killed his own wife. This is the same thing, it's mirrored. If you are having a non-romantic subplot here, just keep in mind that when they are fully transformed, they become pitiful. Whether they are sad about it or not. Kind of like Smeagol becoming Gollum. It's very pitiful, to see them in this manner, being so addicted and obsessed about this ring. They were already too far gone. Even though Frodo wished that they were able to come back, they were not. They were not able to come back. If you're doing the third act and doing things in the Dramatica structure, do think in terms of going big and narrowing down to the personal. Narrowing down to the most vile, personal thing to the main character. Them confronting their nemesis. Their perceived nemesis. Because already the villain who's been seducing them is their friend, is their ally, and someone who's helping them change their world. They don't see them as a nemesis anymore, so they're going to turn on someone who's been, in the first half of the story, their true friend. And they turn on them, and in the end they kill them. They don't have to kill them, they don't have to be sorrowful and sad about that whole action. You can have a totally different climax. You don't have to have a romantic subplot. But you had to showcase the full horribleness of being this villain. Simply because it is terrifying. It is kind of a bit of a horror story. It's supposed to make normal people go, ugh. That's bad. That's all I could give about that. I hope you like this type of video, and I hope this is kind of insightful. I know I used a lot of references to other stories to kind of explain things, but I hope this helped reveal how one would go about this fallen hero act using Joseph Campbell's story arc. And how these two people are able to showcase it through their story. And I hope you could kind of see how you can do things differently from what they had done. In this case, they had done it through the hero's perspective or the seductive villain's perspective. You can easily do it through the romantic love interest if you want. Or the really good friend that gets, stabbed in the end. Or something else. But you have to make sure that you are clear on who you are writing. You have to have a clear idea of who is going to fall, who's the hero that's going to become a villain, who's seducing them to be that way, and who is the new perceived nemesis, or the friend or the romantic person that they turn tables on, that the villain has been pushing them to fight against. So long you're able to keep those characters in mind and keep them straight in the story, you're pretty much good to go. You don't have to have the actual truth in the middle, but it is what people are used to having. If you like this type of video, go ahead and give this a like. If you want to subscribe to my channel, go ahead and click subscribe. I tend to do these videos once every 2 weeks. And shenanigans in life may happen where I may have to do it later. So if that happens, make sure you have a little bell clicked on so that way you could get any notifications. But I hope you like this video, and let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you want to see more videos like this, or do you want to have a different topic you want me to discuss? I know one of you want me to talk about anti-heroes, so I'm going to do that pretty soon. But if there's other things you want to talk about, leave them down below. If you have any questions, I'll answer those as soon as possible. And I'll talk to you later. Bye!